Good morning, Internet. This is live from Twin Cities Drupal Camp 2019 here in beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are starting off the beginning of the first ever Backdrop CMS minicamp. We've already done introductions in the room with our attendees, and we're going to start presenting or discussing in the room about why Backdrop and also do a little demo. So we've got pulled up here the schedule for today, and right now we're going over the short introduction from 9:30 to 10 a.m. And we're just talking a little bit about why Backdrop exists, and that's it, and what it is. Okay, so I wanted to say, our About page really kind of summarizes it. Backdrop is simple, lightweight, easy to use content management system for building professional websites. And then the rest of this is, building out on that concept. But I wanted to open up the philosophy page just because the why of Backdrop is really important to us. I know when Drupal got started, it was we want to build websites, and it would be nice if there was a common system or a structure or something, that multiple people could use and collaborate on. But what does Drupal actually stand for? What are we trying to accomplish with Drupal? Is kind of up until recently a very kind of amorphous, yeah. You got to choose your own adventure kind of thing, where everybody kind of brought their own idea of what Drupal is and what they would want to use it for, or maybe even where Drupal was heading. Everybody brought their own ideas, and then various ideas have won and various ideas have lost. But now Drupal has established itself and its audience. I appreciate now that Drupal's homepage now says, content management system for building ambitious digital experiences. Maybe not content management system, because they don't like boxing themselves into saying content management system. Actually, even that. Framework. Maybe we should pull up the homepage of Drupal.org so that I'm accurate here.
What is it? What is Drupal?
The leading open source CMS for ambitious digital experiences that reach your audience across multiple channels. Because we all have different needs, Drupal allows you to create a unique space in a world of cookie-cutter solutions.
That's updated, yeah.
Yeah, updated a little bit, yeah, plus the flowing blue background. Yeah, ambitious digital experiences, largely, also like the multi-channels actually, because we, on the other side of things, are saying that we are for, in our audience, small to medium-sized businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, companies, organizations. And you have a comprehensive website on a budget. So this on a budget is kind of not the the snazziest, or what's our right word? It's not the.
Doesn't matter.
It's not maybe the most attractive word, that it's like, when budget and time is really important to you, but it's really what we are all about. It's we really want to save people time while they're building websites. And our mission up here at the top, Backdrop CMS enables people to build highly customized websites affordably through collaboration and open source software. Some of these things we've definitely pulled from Drupal or adopted from Drupal, like collaboration and open source software. There's no doubt Drupal is one of the most collaborative platforms probably in existence, as far as really accepting and building up from a lot of different people and combining those ideas. And we want to maintain that. And the open source part, of course, we're open source. That's why we are able to have a fork based on GPL software and continue to offer it as a completely different name, same code base, and a lot of the same compatibility as Drupal. And then highly customized websites. I think it's great that Drupal is now pushing this multi-channel concept, saying, we're not confining ourselves to one thing. And we're on the opposite side of things, where literally we're saying our system builds websites. That's what we really do. Other things, if you want to build a mobile app or build out APIs, you can do these things with Backdrop, but our focus is on websites. You really just want the common denominator of generated HTML, CSS, JavaScript pages. You want to add anything?
Backdrop is for people. That's also something that I think is really important, where Drupal tends to be a developer platform. It's very focused on developers. Backdrop is not focused on developers. It should be for everybody. So that means that we have an increased focus on the people who are using the software when we're done with it, not necessarily just the people who have to build the software initially. So that includes your content editors and your administrators who are going to be clicking a lot. So a big focus on that. And then we also value the needs of our contrib developers more than our core developers. So if the core developers have to do something really hard to make it so that the contrib developers can do something that's easier, we will make that sacrifice, where it tends to be the opposite order in Drupal, where what core developers need comes first, and then comes contrib, and then comes end users. We've turned that around to match more of WordPress's model with they put their content creators first. We're sort of doing the same thing. We've got a whole world of contrib in there too. Were you checking time? Mm-hmm. So I think the point of doing this why Backdrop thing was to, well, I mean, I guess it could be different, but was to tell you sort of at least I wanted to tell you my personal story of how I got here. And you guys might be aware of the fact that I spent a couple of years working on Drupal 8 Core. I was the Twig initiative lead. And a lot of that came from my experience in being a trainer, teaching people how to use Drupal. And that was use the user interface, but also how to code for it, how to write themes, how to write modules. And I started doing that in Drupal 6. And most people sort of jumped on board with 6. They're like, okay, it's a little weird because it's very specific to the Drupal world, but I can get it, I can understand it, I can take a class for a day or a week, I can leave and I can do my job better afterwards. And when we started doing that same set of courseware for Drupal 7, it was a lot harder for people to pick up on the basic concepts they needed to know in order to set up the architecture of a site or to build out a basic theme. And so when I got involved in Drupal 8, the reason I was doing it was to try and make Drupal easier to learn. So that's both in terms of the user interface and in terms of working in the theme system. And so the entire reason I spent 3 years of my life, quit my job to spend more time working on it, was to make Drupal easier. And after doing that for a couple of years and focusing on the front end, I turned around and looked at what happened to the back end and went, what? This is the opposite of what I've been trying to get done. And so when Nate actually decided that he was real, the idea of forking was real and was going to happen, I was like, okay, I get it, but let me find someone to take over Twig, because I still think we need to make Drupal 8 easier, especially now more than ever. And we did that. There were a bunch of people on the Twig team who were willing to take over. But just the whole thing for me was trying to make Drupal more accessible to people and less about being accessible to developers. So that's kind of my reason for having that focus on people in Backdrop.
Yeah, I loved years ago in Bad Camp, you had a session in which you and CHX got up together and you waylaid him with things you didn't like about Drupal 7.
Yeah.
And he had to justify and explain why things had happened in a certain way.
It was an interrogate a core developer conversation where I was just like, okay, database abstraction layer makes me 50% slower in my day-to-day life. How does this benefit me? And he was like, well, security. And then there was a bunch of stuff like that, like theme system complexity. Like this makes me a less efficient developer. Why is this good? And I had to have defense on why Drupal 7 was so much quote unquote worse, and because that's the language I used in that session, than Drupal 6 was in terms of my efficiency and my cost to my clients too. So that was 2011, 2012. So like fairly early in post Drupal 7 years. But it's kind of funny because even before that, I had a session I gave that was WordPress is better than Drupal, where I was talking about user interface and valuing what WordPress prioritizes and how we don't seem to do the same thing in Drupal. And so if you look at my history, you can kind of see this coming, where it's like I've been fighting for the end user, the contrib developer, simplicity, learnability for a really long time. So the fact that Drupal 8 stepped just outside my comfort zone is sort of like, okay, so let's take Drupal 7 and fix all the things that I wanted to fix about it all the way through.
It just feels like I've been fighting a system for like the last 15 years of my life, and maybe
I mean, I wasn't fighting it for the long time. I was shaping it. You know, you're like, oh, I can make a difference. I can make it the user interface better. I can make it easier for people. And then all of a sudden you realize the thing you're trying to shape it into isn't what anyone else wants to shape it into. They're like, no, we're going to make it round. And I'm like, square, square, square. And they're like, no, round. And so I get one corner to be square, and then the rest of it is this blob. And I'm like, it's round, or it's fine. It's just, you know. Yeah.
The rotund CMS. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's required, because I'm probably going to take it in a direction it's a little bit off. But my question is, do you know how many people are on these 7 are treading water right now, undecided on what they're upgrading?
I checked the usage. The question is, do we know how many sites are on Drupal 7? And more specifically, do we know, like, of those, how many people are treading water and trying to figure out what to do next? I checked usage statistics a couple weeks ago, and it was around 800,000 websites that are on Drupal 7. We have no idea how many of those are committed to moving to Drupal 8, giving up on Drupal entirely, thinking about moving to Backdrop. We don't know.
Let me ask you, you build websites and you have clients. How many of your existing clients, how many were new to the, they weren't D7, they weren't D6, they were new to Backdrop. In other words, they came to you, said, I want a website, you recommended Backdrop. And how many were D6 or D7 sites that said, I want to come over to Backdrop?
So the question was, of my personal work, how many of the sites were brand new to Backdrop without having any experience in 6 or 7, and how many of them upgraded? I would say of the Backdrop sites I'm maintaining, most of them came from 6 or 7. I tend to specialize in having long-term relationships with my clients. So like I built a site in Drupal 5 and I'm still maintaining it, and I log in and it's like, you've been a member of the site for 13 years. And I'm like, wow. But part of that is because maintaining those really long relationships means that those sites are going to be upgraded through every version. With new ones, I don't know. I've got maybe 5 people that hadn't had any experience with Drupal who came to Backdrop. A couple of them were, one of them was like a friend of mine who got in trouble and was like, help my web developers holding my website hostage. And I took a look at it and was like, I could redo that for you in a weekend. And I used Backdrop to do that sort of thing. And she did not care what the platform was. But when we got done and I gave it to her and she was like, oh my gosh, I can manage this all myself. It was really liberating for her, where she didn't realize she would have that kind of control.
So most of them were D6 or D7?
Yeah,
D5?
most of them, yeah.
And I guess what I'm driving at is what is being done to go after the 800,000 D7 sites? Because I was reading, every Thursday there's this blog post that comes out. I forget what it's called. It's a D8 blog post. And there was 2 articles in there that were really heavy selling jobs on why D7 people need to upgrade now to D8. And the answer was because D9's coming. If you're not on D8, then you're going to be really in trouble when D9's there. And, it was all filled with fear, and it was very self-serving. And I want to know what a D7 how they're being reached, these 800,000 sites.
Yeah. So the
If you're
excellent.
gonna be here tomorrow, there's a really witty fellow who's going to give a presentation called Drupal 7 is Dead. We are going to talk about exactly what you're talking about. D7, D8, and what are the potential possibilities for people to go to their website.
So I just want to repeat the question for people who might be watching live stream. The question is, what is being done to reach the 800,000 sites that are currently on Drupal 7? As in particular, to let them know about Backdrop. We are doing our best in terms of attending Drupal events and talking to people at Drupal events. That's why we're here now. That's why this mini camp is part of the Twin Cities Drupal camp. That's why we presented at Stanford Web Camp this year. But we are mostly developers and not marketers, and we don't really have expertise in, how to write these self-serving blog posts in various places that might convince people to move to Backdrop. We have recently started advertising, which is new. We are trying to put information out in as many places as possible. We're going to be on a couple of podcasts in the next few weeks and months. But if you have places where you get information, for example, this blog that you read, we can reach out to them and ask them if they're interested in doing a blog post on Backdrop. We want to try and reach these people. It's just not what we're good at. But yeah, this is also an excellent question that came up at Stanford Web Camp. The director of their web team was in our session, and she was like, I really love all of the stuff you're doing, but what are you doing about marketing? And we're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm a developer, so I do the developing and I'm good at that, but I'm not a marketer and I don't do that. So we have a couple of people who've been in our community making recommendations of what we should do. But
I just want to say how much I appreciate what you've done. These sites, I mean, my livelihood really, I don't want to go. You folks have provided an alternative.
Yeah.
You're not getting rich on it. I'm just. My point is, there's 800,000. There's a pool of 800,000 potential clients.
Yeah.
And we know who they are.
Well, do we? Do we?
This is automated reporting. I mean, know where they sit, the owners.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty defined profile. I mean, come on. I mean, you go out on the internet, we can see the sites. And,
yeah, we could spider a lot of it if it really we're up to it. Like, you can find Drupal sites; they're not hard to identify.
Thank you. I'm not being critical.
No. We know this is a problem. Like, our biggest issue right now is when we do go to camps and we give a talk on Backdrop is getting people to walk in the room. So they're like, I'm here for Drupal. Why would I go learn anything about another CMS? And so, yeah, I mean, we definitely have a marketing concern.
You said tomorrow.
Last session of the day.
Shoot. Okay. The flight at 6 o'clock.
That will be recorded. That's a marketing question.
Yeah.
Are we talking to the right people?
Yeah.
Is it the developers that know Drupal and have spent a lot of time learning Drupal 8 that want to convince people that they should switch to Backdrop, just like you were talking about your clients? So you need to reach people when they're buyers, not necessarily the developers, people that are ready to check it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Receiving the checks. Yeah.
well, it's interesting because if you look at the way Drupal grew, it didn't come from decision makers. It came from developers who said, hey, there's this neat software solution. I hear you talking about this problem space. Let me show you how I can solve that with Drupal. But now we're in a world where a lot of decisions are coming the other way around. We're like, oh, my institution is standardized on Drupal. Go hire me a developer is a very different thing. That didn't exist when Drupal was new because no one knew about it in order to standardize on it in the first place. So we're in an interesting place where Backdrop was made by Drupal 7 developers for Drupal 7 developers, but Drupal 7 developers are getting paid by companies that want them to learn Drupal 8. So it's hard.
Why are you pointing at me so because I am the quintessential, yes, Drupal is my day job, but I'm doing Backdrop.
Yeah. And so there are places for people like me where I have the ability to, influence my clients. And there are places for people like Nate where he doesn't really have the ability to influence his clients in the same way. So, I mean, I don't know. I know how to talk to developers. I don't know how to talk to decision makers and check signers and those kind of people. So I agree that's valuable, but I don't know where they are. There's a bunch of questions there we need to figure out in order to how to find that right audience.
But Drupal was really not in that position either, just since they have this Drupal system. Now they're hiring, and you saw the evolution of their website. Now it's online.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So let me say two things on this. One of which is we mentioned the weekly meeting. So we do every other week have an outreach meeting, which is specifically the closest we come to marketing, right, is to talk about outreach and letting people know about Backdrop. And that happens every other Thursday at 2:00 Central Days. And there's, a handful of us get together and talk about these issues. So this is an ongoing discussion. And two, we do have some time set aside later today to actually talk about outreach for the Backdrop community. That's the last thing on our agenda for today, so we'll probably come back to that later.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an excellent question because that is our biggest hurdle right now. We're done in the development department. Like, we've made the product we wanted to make, and now we have to tell people it exists in order for this to be successful. So.
It's not just that, it's also that you have arguments when you talk to your clients why they should do it, right? I mean, there is this benefit of not going to, whenever there's a major release, of not going through all of this. I mean, there's a certain return on investment that you would expect, right? And that's what actually marketeers look at.
Yeah.
I mean, they look at those arguments and use it to put it together, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm actually not going to move on from your discussion. I'm going to keep rolling with this. You need to move to Drupal 9 because when Drupal 9 comes out, 7 is dead. And that's your solid argument, not that the functionality is super compelling and that it's going. And what we would like to say is that it's going to save you time, save you money. Really, that should be the compelling argument. You should move to our system because it's going to save you time.
Or because you want to.
Because you want to.
Not because you're afraid not to.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so with Backdrop, what we've tried to do with modest success is make it so that you can move to Backdrop from Drupal 7 and feel like you've saved time by doing it, and that it's driven trying to soften that let's not force the issue, let's make it easy for you to basically maintain status quo or to keep your site running for as long as possible with as little effort as possible.
Yeah. So we definitely have heard from people in the community about how the Backdrop upgrade from 7 to Backdrop went. And there's one site in particular we like to talk about that has been on Drupal since Drupal 5. And they said moving from Drupal 7 to Backdrop was the easiest upgrade they've ever done. Easier than 5 to 6, easier than 6 to 7. And that's kind of great for us.
It kind of looks like a Drupal 5 website.
But we also want the upgrade from 7 to Backdrop to be the hardest upgrade anyone ever has to do in the Backdrop community. So every future upgrade is going to be easier. We're talking about Backdrop 2 being just removing deprecated functionality, just like they're saying Drupal 9 will be for Drupal 8. We're going to follow a very similar model. That's a model we adopted from Symfony. And so we're right now introducing backwards compatibility for all of the things that are different between Backdrop and Drupal 7. So hopefully, as time moves forward, the upgrade path from getting from 7 to Backdrop will also get less and less painful.
Oh, this is still Drupal 7. It must have been a different website, yeah. But or one of their subsites.
Yeah.
But they did say that, yeah, it was the easiest upgrade, easiest Drupal upgrade they've ever done, which is really funny because it's not even a Drupal upgrade, from Drupal 7 to Backdrop. Only sometimes I say, I can't really say that Backdrop is Drupal, and I can't really say that Backdrop isn't Drupal. It's this kind of is and isn't Drupal all at the same time.
Yeah.
When will the Drupal community cast Backdrop out of its family?
So the question was
When will
when.
it grow up and live by itself and get out of its parents' basement, whatever analogy.
So the question is, when will the Drupal community cast Backdrop out? I think the answer to that question is 2013 was when we were cast out from the Drupal community. But there isn't really any rules about what means you're part of the Drupal community or not. And so even though we've been forbidden from presenting on Backdrop at something like DrupalCon, coming to camps, there's a bunch of organizers and people who think it's valuable for their attendees to know about Backdrop. So they invite us and ask us to do trainings and organize mini camps for us. And so I feel like we're here to serve people. And if people want to know about Backdrop, we're going to stay there. So in terms of our overlap with the Drupal community, it's happening now because the people who are working with Backdrop are working with Drupal. Like, I have Drupal sites, so I work on Drupal sites. I have Backdrop sites, so I work on Backdrop sites. When there's something that has to happen to both of them, we keep them the same. But the fork happened with 7 and 8 before Backdrop. So in terms of like Backdrop and 7 being overlapped, Backdrop and 7 will continue being overlapped until 7 end of life, at which point we expect very little will happen in Backdrop contrib and Drupal 7 contrib or Drupal 7 core, and the majority of the work will happen in the Backdrop world instead. 2021 is the estimated end of life of Drupal 7.
Yeah, and that's that deadline is like, we're going to really need to continue. And there you go, November 2021. This isn't quite the page I was hoping for, I don't think. But up until this point, and probably for a year or two afterwards, like, we're still going to be doing this. We're still going to be trying to tell, spread the word to the Drupal community, hey, you should be looking at Backdrop because we think that it could really help you. All the way up until Drupal 7 is like really ground down. So we still have another
Few years.
Yeah, so quite a few more years yet.
But we are also thinking farther than this. Like, even though Backdrop was built for Drupal 7 and it's made for these 800,000 sites, if that's the only place we're looking, that's not going to make for a successful product because this market will eventually dry up. So at the same time, we've got like an issue open for, or a whole project open for compatibility with Drupal 8. So feature parity. Do we still have all of the same things they have? We have another issue that's like feature parity with WordPress. We've got an issue open that's like a data importer if you're coming from WordPress. So we're trying to say like, okay, well, we have this place where we fit in the market where Drupal 8 has gone upstream and WordPress has got the down end market, but there's a widening gap between those two pieces of software that we're hoping for Backdrop to fill. So that means we still need to target people who've tried Drupal 8 and have decided it isn't for them, people who've tried WordPress and decided it isn't for them and are looking for that alternative thing. So trying to bridge the gaps between those platforms is also where we're looking. So even though right now we're really focused on getting that upgrade path as easy as possible between now and Drupal 7 end of life, beyond that, we're still like, how do we attract all of these other people? So we've got kind of a forward-looking approach on that as well.
Do you have something else you still wanted to add?
Well, there's going to be new developers that enter this space and new evaluations for new websites. And then also like an opportunity, and then the whole templates thing. At some point, people are going to be more than a templates content manager. Then would be a migration path or something.
Yeah,
I
think
again, that's not necessarily website art.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely look at upgrade paths or import paths or migration paths or whatever you want to call them from any other system, especially if we feel like there's something where people will hit a limit and that system is like agreed, we are not going to do more than this. WordPress is a great example where it's defined, like this is exactly what we're going to do. And people who love WordPress are very committed to trying it, but sometimes their project just outgrows the scope of what WordPress can provide. And in that sense, I think like having that, like, oh, here's a really easy way for you to jump from your existing WordPress platform onto a Backdrop platform is really important. Any other software platform that might have that same kind of rigid definition of what it does, and that there might be people that are outgrowing it, is a great audience for us to, target with an importer or whatever we need to do to get that done. So great idea.
Well, that's all the time that we had for both the Y Backdrop and the demo. But should we do the demo anyway?
Yes.
Or
Maybe, has anybody not seen Backdrop before? We did introductions a little earlier. Would it be okay to ask you to quickly introduce yourself?
Can we stop the recording really quickly? can you find the thing and turn it off? Just in case.
All right, we'll be back later.